Okay, so we came to the Battle of Ipsus through the study of Pyrrhus. We understood Pyrrhus to represent the king of the south. We took him back to where he began being involved in the affairs of the world at that time. In studying his early life, we saw that he entered history during the breakup of Alexander's empire. He's born a few years after Alexander dies, and he begins to be involved in the Fourth Diadochi War, when there were 5 generals fighting over Alexander's empire. One of these generals is much stronger than all the others, and Pyrrhus goes into an alliance with his son. Then our strongest general, whose name is Antigonus, went to war with 3 allied powers. That was Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus, known as the 3 allies or allied forces. Antigonus is a more powerful general, and he meets these 3 allies at the Battle of Ipsus. He's not fighting alone. He's fighting alongside his son Demetrius. Pyrrhus is in an alliance with Demetrius. The Fourth Diadochi War culminates in the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC. We understood. Go ahead.
I don't know if you care. The one that I have in my email is following along with what you have right here.
I do care. It's just.
I just looked at that. Mine isn't.
You remember the Ipsus channel, Ipsus part 3?
Mine says Battle of Ipsus, and it has the date, but it, the same words that you have right there are what I have on my page 2 in what you sent in the email.
Yeah, when I open it,
yeah, but just go down to the next slide.
I did that. I already did that, and that's the one we already did. Yeah, that's the one we already did. That's really weird. I don't know why.
Why does it look?
I really don't know why. Because what I did this morning is I emailed them to myself, plus I put it on my external hard drive, and I pulled it from the external hard drive. And when I pulled it from the external hard drive, I don't know what keeps causing the other one to open up. I don't know what I did.
I don't know. I just know that it's following along with what you said. I could email it to you.
Yes, you're saying number 26. Huh?
It doesn't have those words. Number 26, Battle of Ipsus, number 3, but it starts off, we came to the Battle of Ipsus through the study of Pyrrhus. What's that?
I was thinking the same thing. Okay, I got it.
But she
email it to you?
Yeah, I got it. I got the right one open, but I don't know what's wrong with the files. But bear with me a second again, and I'll stop share. Let's see.
Oh, this is exactly the same as your PDF. It is the same. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. I just opened it up in a different place, but I don't know what the scoop is. But so make this full screen. Try this one more time, and we go to play the slide, right?
Share, then play slide.
I think I just did.
You share it, yep, and then play slide.
Yeah, but this is in my way.
Yeah.
Okay.
The thing driving.
Okay, cross your fingers here.
And then click duplicate.
What an ordeal. Okay. And we just pretty much went through all that. I need to move you guys all out of the way. Sorry. Okay. So if we remember what we went through, showing that there's 2 perspectives, and that's what we're going to look at, what we started to look at briefly, and which reminds me too, because back at Portola, when I wasn't sure about that second perspective, that question about Clinton being Seleucus, and I thought, I don't know if she actually said that or if I put it down wrong in the notes, but it's not Clinton. And it made a whole lot more sense once I went back and looked at it. So I don't know if she said Clinton or if I made the mistake in putting Clinton where she said Trump. So that was what was last mentioned in Portola at the very end, that there was another perspective and that's what we're gonna go through, is that other perspective. So what she's showing here, just a reminder that this is the first perspective, which was Ipsus in 2016. You have Antigonus, who is Clinton, and you have Demetrius, who represents Trump, and you have Pyrrhus, who represents Putin. Against the three allies, Seleucus, Lysimachus, and Cassander, and Clinton, Trump, and Putin Clinton and Trump are wanting the executive, judicial, legislative branch. Trump has Putin supporting him. This is our first perspective in the battle. In this battle, we have Antigonus, and who does Antigonus represent? Hillary Clinton, and Demetrius represents Trump. Why are they fighting each other in this battle? They're not fighting each other, they're fighting the three allies. In this battle, they're father and son. In application, why do we not want to see them fight each other? Clinton doesn't want Trump Tower. They're both fighting over something separate from each other. That is the three branches of the US government: the executive, the judicial, and the legislative branches. So what does the name Antigonus mean? And that was brought up in Portola by Sister Lisa, that when you look up the word anti, like Antigonus, anti, that it means against. And I think we've all known that. So we might want clarity to where she gets anti to mean like. But the word Antigonus itself does mean like the ancestor, like or in comparison to the ancestor.
Anti doesn't, that's why I was confused when Sister Lisa was saying that anti doesn't mean against. Antichrist means instead of.
Instead of.
A replacement of, a copy of, like.
Okay.
Right? Because that's what we always, I would need to Google, because it was from the Adventist pulpits that we said, Antichrist doesn't mean a monster, it means someone pretending to be Jesus Christ.
Well, thank
right?
you.
Instead of, so I think that's what.
So like or in comparison to the ancestor. When we consider the Greek Empire, who are they saying he is like? Alexander the Great. So we can do an alpha and omega. We can have Alexander and Antigonus, the beginning of the end of the alpha, the beginning and the end of the alpha and omega. They both built the empire. Daniel is able to skip all 4 Diadochi wars in Daniel 8 verse 8, because this empire is still being pulled together or united until the death of Antigonus, because Alexander was building the Greek Empire and Antigonus was doing the same work. So you can say Washington, those that wrote the Constitution, and Clinton, who upheld the Constitution. We can see that Antigonus goes into this battle with one eye. In a battle previously, he had lost an eye and was blind in one eye, born and blinded in one eye. Born with 2 eyes, one had fallen previously, and Antigonus is killed in this battle, losing that eye. We made application to the 2 horns of the United States. One fell in 1844, one fell in 2016, the Protestant horn and the Republican horn. She's reading a quote from a book, Turning Points, or a book or a website. She mentions website later. So the Turning Points of the Ancient World. Antigonus had been so close to achieving the impossible, reuniting Alexander's empire. At the final hurdle, he was unsuccessful. He was the last man who seriously attempted it to achieve such a dream. With his death, a new time began. Alexander's empire was forever broken up between the remaining generals. It was never reunited again. If we were to see Alexander's empire in the time of Antigonus, he held nearly all of it. He started to lose Babylon to Seleucus, but at the height of his power, it was nearly as large as Alexander's. His goal was to maintain that same empire. The goal of the 3 allies was to create their own empire, an empire built out of Egypt or Babylon. But it isn't considered to be the empire of Alexander the Great out of Macedonia. So Alpha and Omega, we can understand that Clinton represents the establishment as it existed since 1798, and the Republican horn of the United States. But in this battle, about 400 to 500 war elephants divided Antigonus from his troops and left him unprotected. This is one application of the Battle of Ipsus in the 2016 election. Were you going to say something? Okay. So we're going to look at Ipsus from another perspective from what was going on in the Battle of Ipsus. We began also to make another observation. We want to consider this from a couple of different angles. And she's going to read again from that same article, I think is what she's reading from. We understood our three allies won this battle. And out of this battle, Demetrius, though weakened, became king, and Pyrrhus was undefeated. In this following paragraph, it says, for the winners of the Battle of Ipsus, these three allies were able to divide up the empire of Antigonus, a large empire. It says, yet almost straight away, because they were dividing up the empire of Antigonus, it sowed the seeds for a new war. It says in Syria, immediately the seeds of a new war begin between Seleucus and Ptolemy. Each would claim control of Syria. Out of Ipsus, a new war began. Or you could say 6 wars. Out of Ipsus, these 6 Syrian wars led to the end of the fourth, the Battle of Raphia, and at the end of the 5th, the Battle of Panium. So this is our first perspective. Our second perspective of Ipsus relates to Daniel 11 in the battles of Raphia and Panium. So the 6 Syrian wars, you have the Battle of Raphia being the 4th, and the Battle of Panium being the 5th. A web page, Turning Points of the Ancient World. How significant was the Battle of Ipsus? It gives us a nice description of that battle. In our first perspective, we have a king of the north and a king of the south, and we know that they are the king of the north and the king of the south because we can construct the whole reform line to demonstrate that. Right now, we're just pulling out Ipsus and looking at it from 3 different reform lines. We have the reform line of Pyrrhus, and in here we have Ipsus. We have the reform line of Daniel 11, which is Seleucus and Ptolemy. Verse 11, the 11th verse of Daniel 11, verse 4, the Battle of Ipsus. I don't think that's right. It's not verse 4. Is it? Yeah, okay, sorry. That is. So it's before. Before we're done, we'll have a closer look at World War II and the invasion of Poland. Instead of going all the way through Pyrrhus, we're wanting to dig into this one waymark. When we're finished with 2016, we'll finish the line of Pyrrhus. So this is that first perspective here, where you have a king of the north and you have a king of the south, and they're going against the 3 allies. And then you have Pyrrhus, you have Daniel 11 and World War II. We're going to look at all of them and then find the second perspective that is going to give us more information. In a previous study, we went on a diversion in Daniel 11. In Raphia and Panium, we looked at the 6 Syrian wars. Daniel 11 skips the 1st and the 6th of the Syrian wars. These Syrian wars sprung out of the Battle of Ipsus because, as we read, they were dividing up the territory of Antigonus. We have Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in the north, king of the north and king of the south. They're not fighting for each other's territories, but for that area of Coal Syria. At the end of the Battle of Ipsus, Seleucus was awarded this territory. Before he could take it, Ptolemy took it for himself. Everyone knew it had been given to Seleucus originally. Seleucus never fought him for it, but when both men die, their children begin to fight over it. That fight over Coal Syria is Daniel 11, verse 5 to 15. Daniel doesn't include the story of the 6th war. So when you have the 6 Syrian wars, they spark out of Ipsus, and then comes the 6 Syrian wars. And it's Seleucus and Ptolemy that we're going to look at now, as opposed to Antigonus, Pyrrhus, and Demetrius. So you have down here Ptolemy, you have Seleucus in the north, and you have this area of Coal Syria. I may not have my circle in the right place, but I think we're getting the idea. What we need to see, there is no Battle of Raphia without Ipsus. If we were to connect our waymarks, threading the needle, understand cause and effect, then there must have been a cause at Ipsus, which was the disagreement over Coal Syria. If the Battle of Raphia is 2019, we could see the beginning of this conflict in 2016. There's no Raphia at 2019 without 2016. A couple of things we need to mention in review. Demetrius's name means harvest. When we think about Daniel 12:1, harvest, close of probation, Demetrius is the man that takes us into the harvest. There is no harvest without him. That is one nice evidence to see that he's the last president of the United States, because he's the one that takes us into harvest. From this perspective, who is the king of the north and the king of the south in Daniel 11? You're all reading, or if anybody wants to interact and answer. If you're looking at that map that was on the previous one, you've got Ptolemy and Seleucus and Coal Syria. Who's the king of the north and the king of the south?
Seleucus is north, Ptolemy is south.
Right. So you're talking about the same battle, but looking at it from a different perspective. As opposed to Antigonus, Demetrius, and Pyrrhus, you're going to look at it with Ptolemy and Seleucus now. Same battle.
Wait, but we're not focusing on Demetrius.
Not in this perspective.
Right, right.
Yeah, not in this perspective.
So that's the point, right?
Yeah. That Seleucus and Ptolemy are now the
Right.
king of the north and the king of the south. In the Battle of Ipsus, Ptolemy actually supported. Did I start that right? In the history of our first perspective, it's Pyrrhus and Demetrius. We have another story for the same battle, Seleucus and Ptolemy. In the Battle of Ipsus, Ptolemy actually supported Seleucus. Remember, they were all four allies? Okay. We have Seleucus going into battle supported by Ptolemy. It's interesting that in this battle, Ptolemy doesn't actually turn up because he's received word that the battle is lost. Because remember, you have your four generals, and Ptolemy's one of those four generals, but he doesn't go to this battle. And it's interesting because you see what he was doing, which was interesting that in the battle of Ptolemy doesn't actually turn up because he's received word that the battle is lost, which was not true. He received a false report. Even though he's not at Ipsus, because if this is the election, the United States election, he doesn't even have a vote, but he's still involved. There's a city in Coal Syria, in the Coal Syria area. Somebody might know how to better say that than me. Yeah, within Coal Syria area, that belongs to Antigonus. And while our three generals are coming against Antigonus, Ptolemy is laying siege in this area belonging to Antigonus. He is fighting Antigonus even though he's not at Ipsus. So this is a battle between the king of the north and the king of the south because Ptolemy is wanting that city that belongs to Antigonus. Let's see.
Does that show like the progressiveness 2014 or something? I don't know. Because he's already, though he's not actually fighting, he's setting up gear. I don't know, like they're showing progression.
Gearing up for.
Yeah.
But it's actually going to be two separate perspectives of the Battle of Ipsus to give us different points in each
Right.
perspective.
Right, but
Yeah.
I'm just pointing something out that no.
The progression between 2016
Yes.
and 2019? Yeah. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
I
Sorry.
guess that's what I mean. It's okay. No, but isn't this still the battle of 2000? Wouldn't it be before? Because we're talking about coming up to the battle of Ipsus, right?
No, we've
Or-
already,
it
2016
already
was
happened.
Ipsus.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
coming up to
yeah,
Raphia.
yeah.
Okay, coming up to Raphia.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a city in Coal Syria that belongs to Antigonus, and while our three generals are coming against Antigonus, remember the three generals, the Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus are coming against Antigonus. Ptolemy is laying siege in this area, the area of Coal Syria that belongs to Antigonus. He is fighting Antigonus even though he's not at Ipsus. It's not a coincidence that this is the city of Sidon. Oh, I'm pretty sure I looked that up, but Sidon, where's Sidon in the ship?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
right. If anybody wants to look in here real quick, or you got your notes handy?
Actually, I'm looking at it right now.
Oh, good.
Let's see.
I don't dare change screens.
I know. It was on the first one.
Sidon. Does anybody remember that wants
It's
to?
an adramedium, right?
Are you asking who Sidon is?
Yeah,
On the
it's
ship, on the
9/11.
ships. I'm trying to remember where
9/11.
Sidon is.
Is it the United States?
It's in verse
9/11.
3. Verse 3 of Acts 27. 9/11.
It is 9/11? Okay, that's what I thought.
9/11.
Okay. So let's see. Where have we seen Sidon before? Acts 27. What did Sidon represent? Oh, there it is right there. Again, John, see, I know better either. There's our answer. We placed it at 9/11, the United States. So we can place the United States at 9/11, but at many other waymarks. It's not a coincidence that this is the city that Ptolemy was attacking. And I even had it there. Shame on me.
You
Okay.
didn't see it. It's okay.
So it just means I need to know the material myself. We all do,
I
you know what I
know,
mean? We need
yeah.
to know it more ourselves. So so you have this second perspective is Seleucus and Antigonus fighting. We can see that through what is set up here, that Ptolemy did not come to the battle with the three allies, but Ptolemy instead was laying siege upon a territory that belonged to Seleucus. Okay? And the territory that he was after was Sidon, which places it at 9/11. Everybody follow that so far? So this gives us another perspective. Again, we have the king of the north and the king of the south in an alliance, while the king of the north takes on a common enemy. At the 2016 election, it was Putin and Trump. In an alliance, they took on Clinton and Obama. We can see the destruction of Clinton and really the United States as a democracy. That was our second perspective.
I have a question. Why is Obama brought in there when Obama was not running? He already was president.
Yeah, he was president. She was wanting to follow him. I don't know if there's another reason to say that, but she wanted to be the next president, being a Democrat following Obama.
Right.
So it's really about Democrats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So that was our second perspective.
And Obama also is because the work that he did against slavery and the human rights.
So we are able to see the Battle of Raphia. We stepped back to the verses of Daniel 11 and identified Panium, Raphia. We could see 1989 in application, 1798, 538, all the way through those 10 verses. We need to add one more structure to this. So you can look at where she's laying out these Syrian wars and how she's marking them, and we're going to see why Daniel skips over what he skips over and why we can skip over and call things noise. And I pray that we all have, myself included, a greater understanding of these things as we continue to go through this. In Daniel 8, verse 8, we're going to draw out what Daniel has done. Somebody want to read Daniel 8, 8?
Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven.
So when you read that, you don't see the in-between time. You only see it go from 1 to 4. Okay. So in 8:8, we can see that he's gone from 1 general, Alexander, to our 4. We've considered what he is doing here. We have our 1 king, Alexander, 323 BC, the death of Alexander in 323, and he skips 22 years of history. He takes us to 301 BC when we have 4 generals. This is the history of the 4 Diadochi Wars. The Battle of Ipsus ends the 4th war. What Daniel has done is really condensed history from where it begins to be destroyed or crumble to the death of Antigonus.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
So you know how she talks about we're 2 battles down in a 4 battle war?
Yes.
Okay, so the first battle, it's Heraclea, Ipsus, and then Asculum and Beneventum, right? Asculum, or also known as Raphia, and then Panium.
It's
Right.
It's for Ipsus,
Oh, Ipsus Heraclea.
Asculum.
Asculum Beneventum.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ipsus is already, where was I going with that?
Ipsus and Heraclea are both.
2 battles down in a 4
Yes.
battle war.
I know,
Yeah.
but there was something that was said, the 4 Diadochi Wars. That
Ipsus ended was it the
so
end
that's
of the
going
Fourth
into
Diadochi War?
so okay, so then how many more after Ipsus? Isn't that
It doesn't.
oh it isn't okay, sorry.
Because Ipsus was the last of the 4, and for us, Ipsus is the first of the 4.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's a mirror
So
image.
what is
I
that?
don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. What is that? Yeah.
If we're saying that they are one person, then we need to bring them together. So if we're saying Alexander and Antigonus are one person, then you bring them together. This is not a history of destruction. The Republican horn is not crumbling. We can pinch those 2 men together and skip all these 4 wars. If we're going to mark the destruction, we can mark it at Alexander or at Antigonus. So we have the cause and the effect. This is Daniel 8:8. What we're doing in making application here is skipping over this history, the history of 538, 1798, 1989. Daniel calls this history noise. We're doing the same structure. We're going from the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC, and we're saying this is the cause. The effect is Raphia which is in 217 BC. To get from Ipsus to Raphia, all these middle verses of Daniel 11 are 4 Syrian wars. Ipsus is the end of the 4th Diadochi War. Raphia is the end of the 4th Syrian War. Daniel calls this noise, straight from cause to effect. He wants to make one application, and we can do the same with Ipsus. We want to mark a cause and effect, and there is no Raphia in 2019 without Ipsus in 2016. Even our story of Raphia and Panium begin with the North and the South in alliance, but that alliance turns. We're marking 301 BC as the end of an empire, and Daniel doesn't cover the history between the death of Alexander and Ipsus, 301 BC. It's broken at the death of Alexander. The empire crumbles.
The empire continues.
The empire continues, thank you, through till the death of Antigonus. He's like the ancestor, they're the same person. So we can see the Diadochi Wars, death of Alexander, the 4th down to the 4th Diadochi War, which ends at the Battle of Ipsus. And Alexander's the cause, and Ipsus, there we have, is the effect. Then what we're looking at for us is the Battle of Ipsus being 2016, the cause that brings about Raphia, the effect. So one is a story of the Diadochi Wars ending at the Battle of Ipsus, and one is the story of the Syrian Wars beginning with the Battle of Ipsus. And I think we just
that's
said
what I was trying to understand.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to see what was going on there.
Confirmation.
Yeah.
So he's skipping the history and calling it noise. 538, 1798, 1989. And going straight to 2016.
So is the Syrian Wars like what you call it? I don't want to say a type, but it's like it's like the Diadochi Wars. What am I trying to say? It's for our time. Syrian Wars is like.
She probably understands it better than I do, but let me give it a shot. When it comes to the Battle of Ipsus, the Battle of Ipsus took it from, you had 5 generals to the 4. But when you come to the Syrian Wars, you only have a king of the north and a king of the south. Is that correct? You're down to just the king of the north and the king of the south, Ptolemy and Seleucus.
Yep. Yeah. Because it was one verse, and it glazed over all that history until it went straight to just north and south. So yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking at the process and understanding why Daniel skipped what he skipped, because he was just giving the point that needed to be made, that the Alexander the Great was down, and that there's 4 generals, and he takes you to the 2, king of the north and king of the south,
Right,
because
I
the rest of the chapter is that's what the battle's about.
Oh, okay. So I get that. So the Diadochi Wars is kind of like the stuff that was in between.
In
right?
between.
and then
The
what-
successor wars.
Right. Oh, okay. Before.
From Alexander
Okay.
to Antigonus,
Yeah.
you had dozens of generals
Oh,
and
yeah.
dozens of battles, and that's what the
Yeah.
Diadochi Wars are.
Oh, okay. Wow, it's starting to click.
Can I bring it to our time? Because I just thought of this
Yeah,
while you
yeah.
guys were
Oh,
talking
please
about.
don't confuse my mind.
No.
Okay.
So we know George Washington, and then we don't know any other president until 1989. We don't
What?
think any of them are relevant that much. All we talk about is our history because you have the king of the north and the king of the south fighting. So
So she
our-
kind of says that. I don't remember if it's one, but it might be.
Scott Leakin, he's talked about, and
yeah, but on our, it's the same thing. We learned that history is important also. We've figured out that slavery and the civil rights movement, we just figured out in our movement that that's really important, and it's
Right.
prophetic. And we went to Daniel and we figured out that history of the 4 Diadochi Wars is actually important and prophetic. We never paid attention to it prophetically like we did the battle between the king of the north and the king of the south. We always looked at that mostly. But now we're learning there are hidden histories in our time and hidden histories in Daniel's time that are actually hidden but important, and were there for us to understand.
And each one of them is a
Yeah, I get
perspective
that.
to help us to understand by what has happened, what is happening, what will happen.
Right.
what will repeat.
Yeah. So we can read Daniel 11:4, halfway through the first sentence. His kingdom is divided to the 4 directions of the compass. Somebody want to read Daniel 11:4? Again, I don't dare change my screen.
I got it.
Okay.
The Bible is trained to open there
To
automatically.
Daniel.
Okay, so you said 11:4, right?
11:4, yeah.
And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even 4 others besides those. So it went straight in that verse from Alexander to the 4 horns, and then the next verse is going to go to the 2.
Okay.
So, because verse 5 says, and the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong over him and have dominion.
And who's his prince?
Seleucus.
Seleucus.
Yeah, and he is the king of the north who's strong over him. So it just went pop, pop.
Yeah.
It's really quick.
Jumped.
Mhm.
When in his empire, when is his empire divided into the 4 directions? And that's the Battle of Ipsus. Is what we're learning in that verse. That's the Battle of Ipsus. So Ipsus is in these verses, even if he doesn't name it. We don't find the names Raphia and Panium either, but we know they're in those verses. It's not Ipsus that is noise, it's the connecting history. What we can see people want to do is this, if this is 2016 and this is 2019, 2016 is verse 4 of Daniel 11, and 2019 is 11 to 12. We're going to want to go into those verses and reapply them. She's saying that people will want to go in and reapply the missing, the part that's noise, and go reapply them. Because you're going to see it when you jump over them. Yeah, we'll see it as we go forward. I don't know if I can explain it myself yet, but because you might wind up looking at the fact, well, wait a second, 2016 was Ipsus, what about 538, 1798, 1989? So they want to reapply the verses. So anyway, so I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe we'll see it and get it as we continue to go through. So people are going to want to reapply those verses. We're saying based on the structure, we don't do that. These 4 words become noise. I think it's supposed to say wars, sorry. Become noise. We're doing the history just the same way Daniel does. Like he picked up certain points, we are picking up different points. Like Parminder said, he might pick up 4 kings, and I don't know what she meant by this statement, maybe somebody else does. He might pick up 4 kings and 2 kings, and we're picking up 5 kings and 3 kings.
4 kings, 4 horns, 2 kings, north and south. That's
Okay.
what Daniel picks up.
Okay.
Yeah, and then
Thank
we're
you.
picking up Antigonus, Demetrius, Pyrrhus, and all the other ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but we're treating the history in the same way. So we are jumping from verse 4 to 11. The question is, when we come to this history of 2016, then we would want to place 538 and 1798 and these other waymarks that exist between verse 4 and verse 11. The only reason we would want to make those applications is because Daniel makes them for us. If Daniel was to have taken this history, he could have gone into the Diadochi Wars and placed another line of evidence here. But he hasn't chosen the Diadochi story. He's chosen the Syrian Wars story. So what she's saying here, what I mentioned previously, is take 2016 and you have verses from 2016, verse 4 to verse 11 and 12, Ipsus to Raphia, that in between in those verses, you have all this other history. But we're calling that history in this aspect as well, in this perspective, noise as well, just as he did.
Wait, what is the 538 and the 1798? Why is that right there?
If you go,
I don't think I can back up, so.
yeah, if you hover over here, remember there's the back button.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Where do you see? Oh, 538.
Yeah,
Yes.
see, because
This is
Ipsus is verse 4 and Raphia is verse 11 and 12.
Yeah, I get that. But like,
And people would want to put this history in between,
why?
but we're calling this history noise, just as called these battles up here noise, and he went straight from the death of Alexander to Ipsus, the death of Antigonus.
But what are those battles? Is 538?
No, they're not battles. It's
I
his
know,
history.
but
It's his actual history.
wait. Okay, so there's in Daniel 11, you have the literal battles of the
Right.
Syrian wars, and we have an application that we put on top of that. And for verse 5, we put that as a 538 because you have a king of the north that's strong above everyone else in
Great dominion.
great dominion. In verse 7, in verse 6, we apply the date of 1797 because there's a peace treaty of Tolentino. Verse 7 is 1798, a deadly wound. Verse 11 is verse 10 is 1989. 11 to 12 is midnight, and
okay.
13 to 15 midnight cry, and then Sunday laws verse
Oh,
16.
and because they're not talking about
Yeah,
that,
I
and
have it on there.
because they're not talking about that, then people are wondering why are they skipping over that history
Yeah.
in there. Oh, okay, got
Yeah.
it.
So
Okay, got it.
it's an application.
Everybody
Yeah.
follow that? Everybody follow that?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a chart, the gray chart, that talks about the battles of the king of the north and the king of the south from FFA. It has it on there, and the
Okay.
application with each verses. So
Okay. Okay, so the question is, when we come to the, I think we read this part, right?
Yeah.
We actually moved, we
moved,
stopped,
yeah.
okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I gotta remember I can go back to. We've been doing this for a long time. We take the line of Christ, we take the year 27, 31, 34, because they are in agreement with our understanding of the lines, and we all know, I got something wrong in there too, to ignore a lot of history. We all ignore a lot of history that takes place during these years, and sometimes we say 31 is the close of probation and put another waymark in between, which is the triumphal entry. Sometimes we would put 31 as the close of probation, and we put another waymark in here. We call this fractals. We did the same with this history, I believe. I think what Brother Matthias, and she's talking in the classroom, this was a question that came up, is saying is that we would go to the line of Christ and construct a reform line out of those verses in that history. But then because of a structure or another reform line, we would go to that same history and make another application. To do that, we would ignore waymarks to create a different story. We're having trouble with the chronological sequence. How can you have 2016, and this is going to come up with the same question that you just basically had. How can you have 2016 jump back 2,000 years and then go back?
Yeah.
It's like cherry picking. Daniel chooses to ignore all that history, all this history. We aren't ignoring it in our studies. we're going to the history of the Third Diadochi War, and we will say this is the alpha history of modern Babylon. One of the most important histories we can have in this movement is understanding World War I and World War II. Daniel doesn't even mention them. The only reason we're struggling to treat these histories the same way is that we have Bible verses attached to them and other applications in this movement. We need to treat them the same way, and that is to ignore them as noise. Anybody want to summarize that?
I get that point. Makes sense. That if you're going to focus on a certain, how do I want to put this? If you're going to if you're going to come to a war or understanding a scripture, you can't, never mind. It's not, because there's noise. And if you bring that noise of all that you know from previous studies into the application, it will kind of,
Put us in the wrong place.
yes, exactly.
So we have, like in this diagram up here, we have taken and made other applications
Right.
to prove a different point. Just like taking this perspective of Ipsus, the first perspective being that you have Antigonus, Demetrius, with Pyrrhus supporting Demetrius against the three allies, but then we're taking and looking at Ipsus from a different perspective of Ptolemy and Seleucus, the king of the north and the king of the south battle. So all that's happening here is the same thing, taking it to make a particular point. Do you have any comments over there?
You're breaking down each perspective. You can't bring two perspectives into one. I don't know how to put
Each
that.
one gives different important information.
Yeah, and you can put other information into that perspective when you're trying to understand that one perspective. Is that like, because then it'll become all noise. Because if you're bringing those into that perspective that you're looking at, then it kind of, it may have some relevance. It may not have any relevance, but it still can apply to those places, if that makes sense.
So this,
If you have a little kid and you're trying to teach it shapes and stuff, and you
Yeah.
put a pile of paper cutouts of circles, squares, and triangles, and you say, okay, I want you to pick up all the triangles and let's look at them.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, let's pick out all the circles now and look at those.
Yeah.
They're all important and they all
Exactly.
teach you a shape.
Exactly.
and just to,
But they all have one similarity in common, and then these have this similarity in common. And that's what you're
Right.
supposed to learn.
But if you bring those circles into the square, what happens? Noise. So that's the
Right.
that's the point.
there you go.
That's what I was trying to say. Thank you, Sister Adrian, for that.
So what she's saying is we're going to the Third Diadochi War, and we're saying, we're going to the Third Diadochi War, and we'll say that this is the alpha history of modern Israel, or modern Babylon, which we're now lining up as World War I and World War II. Okay? So Daniel doesn't even mention that part. He skips over. Okay, somebody want to read Daniel 11, 2-4?
Daniel chapter 11,
Yeah,
verse 2?
chapter 11, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those.
So in application, that mighty king is Donald Trump. In verse 5, when is that? We didn't read verse 5, shouldn't have verse 5 on here, so.
And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion.
So when is verse 5? When did we say the great dominion was?
Isn't it the I want to say the Battle of Ipsus, but I could be wrong. Wouldn't it be the Battle of Ipsus?
The Great Dominion is when this king of the north, divided the four winds of heaven and his posterity, not according to the dominion of the world, was king was plucked up. In verse 5, let me read verse 5 again. Let me just look at it. The king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes.
Oh no.
She just answered it. Ptolemy and Seleucus is his prince, right? So if the king of the north is going to be stronger,
Right.
it's the history of 538, the 1260. Okay, so it's the period of 1260. The traditional reading of Daniel 11 for the movement, as we've understood it, is to actually do this, except we go from the introduction of Trump to Sunday law to 538 and say that it's going to cover the history of the king of the north and the king of the south. We've got some noise going on. The last line we want to put on top of this is the history of World War II. This is the invasion of Poland, and this gives us other details. Instead of the dynamic, particularly where we see Demetrius and Antigonus, the story doesn't give you the rise of the king of the north. He's already in power. This is Hitler and Stalin. And again, they are taking on the three allies. This is World War II, the same waymark. Why can we go to the history of World War II and do this? Or to do this? When we did the Alpha and the Omega histories, we understand Pyrrhus comes in two parts. When we're considering the king of the south, there's an Alpha and an Omega. How can we then tie the Alpha history to World War II? Because we did Alpha and Omega of Pyrrhus and recognized that he represented Putin in the Omega history, but there is an Alpha history. It's two parts. How did we get to World War II?
By looking at World War One.
Is that
Right,
too?
the Alpha history isn't that right?
No.
Oh, and she's asking something different.
What's the
What
question?
is she asking? How did we get to World War II?
Pyrrhus was 10th of a Pyrrhus, and we considered that a king equals a kingdom. And then who also typifies Putin? Stalin. So we can identify Stalin as the Alpha history. And when does Stalin fight against the king of the north? In World War II. Because who is trying to ride Hitler as a beast?
Papacy.
The papacy. There's an alliance between the Vatican and Hitler because they both had one common enemy, the communist Soviet Union under Stalin. When we considered World War II, the invasion of Poland was 2016 in application. And now we have Hitler taking on how many allies? 3. France, Poland, and Britain. And Hitler has an important ally. Who is he allied to? Stalin. And I did go back and look. I think somebody else did. Maybe it was Adriana, too, to John's presentation last night. She did have I emailed her about that and asked her, because she did have 2014 on there in that spot.
I still want to know about the midnight cry thing too.
I don't think I asked her that. I think I only asked her if she could, if maybe I missed somewhere where why she put 2014 in that spot. Even though they're mortal enemies, they begin their histories as allies. Without Stalin, Hitler would have never been able to go to war with the three allies. Again, we make application. King of the South, Putin, is enabling the King of the North, Trump, to take on the three branches of the US government. He takes the one branch quickly, Poland, and then there's a prolonged war with France and Britain. And the aspect of World War II is it gives us war on the Western Front. We can see that what Trump is fighting now is as much a part of this war as is Raphia and Panium, because World War II has two fronts. From the invasion of Poland, it's war on the west. From Operation Barbarossa, it's war on the east. So when we see Trump declare a national emergency, go to war with Congress, shut down the government, face investigation, impeachment, you know that there's war on the Western Front. In that war, there are many battles fought in the courts, on the streets, over Twitter and social media. It's a war largely of information. We know that this is 2016 and 2019. What is happening on the West soon will turn on the East. These two men that started up as allies were fighting much the same way as Trump is fighting now.
I was gonna say in the news, Russia is also, we already know, interfering with the information warfare, in that they are putting out media or videos of racism, like to cause division in America. That's what they're putting out now on the news, that like it's no secret anymore that Russia has had or interfered with how do you call it?
The United States.
Yes, the United States. And so they're continuing to do that, and it's only getting stronger and stronger. And yeah, they are really seeking to cause division.
No, they said that they will interfere with
Yeah,
2020
yep,
election.
yep. And they said that too. They're going to do that.
So Hitler begins World War II. You have Hitler or Trump in application. Hitler supported by Stalin, Trump supported by Putin against the three allies. With Hitler, the three allies were Poland, which is the executive branch. Poland was taken quickly, but it's still to gather to have control over those three allies, the executive, judicial, and legislative branches. So it takes a process of time to conquer all three, and that is war on the Western Front. We were able to see World War II through the line of Pyrrhus, understanding that Pyrrhus had an alpha history and an omega history, showing us modern Babylon. I pray I say this right. Modern Babylon, where you have an alpha and an omega history, and that alpha history. Is that right? Did I say that right? Stalin and Putin. Yep. So
You need to change your words because we've read this already and you're reading something else.
no, I'm just going over the charts, is all.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just reviewing the charts. Sorry. I should have moved my mouse over so you can see what I was doing. Sorry.
Okay.
So then you go down to this last graph here, where you have 2016 lines up with 1939, which is the invasion of Poland, which is the Battle of Ipsus, where Trump takes the executive branch. But he gets it by being in an alliance with Putin. Okay, that's war on the Western Front. War on the Eastern Front begins in 2019 at the Battle of Raphia, where he's going to turn his weapons toward the east. So they started as allies, even though everybody knew that they were natural enemies. And this is Ipsus is the only battle that they fought where they were on the same side. Did Demetrius conquer Seleucus? You can't say that Demetrius is defeated, and we're looking into why is Demetrius not a part of this, because we're looking at Ptolemy and Seleucus, so why is Demetrius not a part of this? So you can't say that Demetrius is defeated. He leaves because his father has died. In this model, you can't have a victory by three branches of government. The three branches can't win anything. How is the judicial branch going to win anything? It can't. So these three branches can't actually win anything. We need another aspect to show us that perspective. If we're going to have a battle 2,000 years ago illustrate a United States election, that's why we need more than one perspective. It's this perspective that shows us who wins. It also shows us who is using this new mode of warfare. It's Seleucus that has the nearly 500 elephants, and it's believed that it was Seleucus's men that killed Antigonus. So we can understand this from this perspective. This one shows us the death of Antigonus. So the second perspective, and we already kind of had it up there, but just to try to get more familiar with it, that rather than Demetrius being Trump and Pyrrhus being Putin, we're going to look at it with Seleucus being Trump and Ptolemy being Putin. And remember that we already mentioned that Ptolemy and Seleucus are allies. They're the 4 generals that are allied against Antigonus. So this is just taking another look, another perspective of the Battle of Ipsus and how we get to the death of Antigonus. So here's the 2 of them together. The first perspective, Ipsus 2016, shows us the death of Antigonus, and the second perspective shows us who wins. And it shows us that it's Seleucus is the one with the 500 elephants, right? That causes the death of Antigonus.
Wow. Well, that's interesting that that's the case, because I thought that, what is it? They they got separated.
Right.
And then that's when the elephants came in, but it didn't.
It's not the elephants that actually killed him. It was the elephants that caused the separation, to separate him from the 2 armies.
And he did not, and when we go back into that history, he did not intend for that to happen, right? Or did he intend? Because isn't that
Seleucus,
father
you
and
mean?
son?
Father and son is
Father
Antigonus, and
and
Demetrius is not in this story.
Okay.
Demetrius is
Yeah.
not in this story. It's only
Yeah.
about Antigonus, the death of Antigonus,
Right.
and looking at who is Antigonus and who is Seleucus, because Seleucus is the one that brings the elephants
Right.
What-
against.
What do you mean Demetrius isn't in this?
He's not in this perspective.
On this person?
In this perspective.
Because in the actual battle, Demetrius was supposed to come help Antigonus.
And he couldn't get to him to help him.
That's
He
what I'm
couldn't,
saying.
so he was removed out of the battle. He was kept stalled with they had like a separated fleet that went to stop him and hold him back, so he couldn't come help his father. So it was Seleucus and Antigonus all by themselves fighting, and Antigonus couldn't stand up against him.
Okay. Can we go back so I can see that in my head? Who's Seleucus? Trump. And who's father and son? Trump.
Demetrius and Antigonus are father and son in the first perspective.
Okay.
And they represent, Demetrius represents king of the north and Pyrrhus is the king of the south.
Right, I
Demetrius is
get
fighting
that.
with Antigonus, but Pyrrhus is only
Right.
supporting Demetrius.
Right.
Okay? But their battle is against the 3 allies.
Right.
But in the other perspective, looking at Ipsus, you have what the actual battle, or I don't want to say it that way, the actual battle, but you have what we're reading behind the scenes, that Seleucus and Ptolemy, because that's what the verse is Seleucus and Ptolemy, where Seleucus has a portion of, in his territory, Coal Syria, and Ptolemy goes in and takes a part of it, which happens to be Sidon, which we mark at 9/11. And so in a sense, he's actually fighting against, now it's showing a different perspective that there is actually a battle between Seleucus and Ptolemy, a king of the north and a king of the south.
Right.
While in one perspective, we put Demetrius and Pyrrhus as the king of the north and the king of the south to show the death of Antigonus. This perspective shows us who actually wins the battle. And it's Seleucus that wins the battle, using the elephants
Yeah.
against Antigonus.
Yeah.
That I know
Yeah, I
it
get-
takes a while for me
yeah,
for it
I
to
have
ring
to
bells too.
digest
I don't know if you guys got it.
Because only
following that.
because when the elephants come in, when I heard the story the first time, it was that he couldn't get to his father. It wasn't this it
He
was
drove the elephants in between the 2 armies.
yeah, but it was like as if he didn't, I don't know, maybe I heard it
Demetrius
wrong.
flees, it says,
Mhm.
and Pyrrhus is undefeated.
Right.
So now we're looking at,
He flees?
that's what, I can back up a few slides.
But I thought that one was trying, like they're fighting, they're on the same battle. Like Antigonus and Demetrius are on the same battle. Like they're not fighting each other. they're fighting for the.
But what we're looking at is,
Yeah, I get that.
what we're looking at is while this first perspective is happening, remember Ptolemy's not there?
Yeah.
So what we're looking at now is, where was Ptolemy? If Ptolemy wasn't there, where was he?
Okay.
During this actual battle, Ptolemy was actually laying siege on a territory that belonged to Antigonus. Did I say it's to Seleucus?
He wasn't in the battle.
Ptolemy wasn't in the battle, but Ptolemy is one of their allies. I guess I should do it for these guys. But Ptolemy is one of their allies, but he doesn't show up to the battle. But what he's actually doing while he's not at the battle is he's laying siege on a territory that belongs to Seleucus, which then you can take it to a king of the north, king of the south.
Oh, so it goes into the next.
Two separate perspectives.
Okay.
Same battle.
Yeah. Okay. Same battle.
Same battle.
Okay. I just have to digest this.
I know, me too.
We can't look in a million different directions, right?
You can only look in one direction at a time.
I know. I guess because my mind is trying to connect
And
it
connect
all,
them, I know.
and then but you have to compartmentalize them, and
That's a good word.
and because I only know that because when you study the differences between female and I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But it's true. When they talk about that, the mind of the woman wants to connect everything, and the male, they compartmentalize things in their head, and
Well, we're needing to
I
learn
know.
that, well, since we're all equal, we need to know how to compartmentalize them.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Teach us your way.
Exactly.
That's why they were made for each other.
So they can never agree on anything.
So when we go into the history of Pyrrhus, there's actually 4 battles. We spent all our time so far on the first one, but there are 3 more: Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. The Battle of Asculum is Raphia. We're still marking a battle in this history, and we're asking why it's still war on the Western Front. In the history of World War II, Stalin and Hitler are in an alliance from 2016 to 2019, but their relationship is strained at a period in between, so we can mark something in this history. But there's not open warfare until Operation Barbarossa. That alliance is still in effect. Now, instead of just fighting the West, he's turning on his ally. Trump wants to build the wall. He needs money for that wall. Who is he at war with right now? He's at war with the legislative and the judicial branches. They won't do as he says, so that's why he's passing this emergency order, and then went and played golf. These are her words, okay? There is war in the West. So she's trying to get us to understand and separate the distinction between war on the Western Front and war on the Eastern Front. You can't have his ultimate goal, like was Hitler, is to the war on the Eastern Front, to defeat the Soviet Union. But he couldn't go to that battle until he had fought the battle and defeated on the war on the Western Front. The war on the Western Front is war against his own government here in the United States, to have control of it all, so he can go do what he really wants to do.
So that's presidency, right?
Right, in all 3 branches.
Right.
So that then he can go and do what he ultimately wants to do, to be the superpower, the one world order, the UN with the US in control.
Yeah. He is a great fit, actually, now that I think about it. Who else would have wanted that? Really wanted? I mean, there are probably other people, but he seems like a great fit to do the job, to actually do that.
So let's see here. So there's war in the West. When we talk about the West, the United States is a large part of the West. He's still attacking NATO and Britain, the European Union. He's attacking the West. This is mainly talking about inside the United States. He wants a war. He's going to battle against the legislative and judicial branches.
Can I say something?
Mm-hmm.
You know, his daughter is his advisor.
Yeah.
So I wonder, what does that mean? Because she is the one advising him on what moves to do.
Which leader was it that went to the young men for advice instead of the old men?
Solomon's son, Rehoboam.
Rehoboam, isn't it?
Yeah, Rehoboam.
Because the old men would tell you, buddy, where you're headed with this nonsense is bad. And his daughter's like, this is great, Dad. You got this. You just can't.
And that's what the young advisors told. Yeah.
Oh, okay, see. But she's also female, so I wonder if that has, I don't know.
So you have Poland representing 2016 in the Battle of Ipsus. I don't have this perfectly aligned, but what they're saying here is that there's a battle in between. That battle in between was 2018, which was Heraclea. And that's another study that I know the gist of it, but not enough to elaborate on it. So we'll wait until we get to that part to go through it, the Battle of Heraclea. But it shows all the different things that Trump did that show that their relationship got a little sour in the middle, which is also what happened with Stalin and Hitler. They made an alliance, but there was a problem in between, before Barbarossa. And Barbarossa is Asculum, Asculum is Raphia. Everybody follow that?
It's that chart that
That John
had last night,
Yeah. So in this history, it's the history of failure. It takes you to 1945. Who wins in 1945? The King of the South. And who wins in our time? The King of the North. If the Millerites had done their job, would we exist?
No.
Would there be any line of the 144,000? No. There's no omega history if the alpha is successful. The only reason there's an omega history is it fails in the alpha. If the Millerites had finished their work and Jesus had come back, then there would be no omega history. It's the same for the alpha, which makes us consider when we go to 1844 and there's a mistake in their prophetic message and a disappointment, can we expect the same? Or was there a history of failure? Was theirs a history of failure?
Theirs was a history of failure.
We will go into that history more later in detail. We're nearly finished with Ipsus. We need to make one final point, that Hitler could not take on the three allies without an alliance with Stalin, which we kind of just briefly touched on. Much of the material he needed, whether it was gas or rubber, had to come from Stalin to fund his war effort. This battle is won by 500 war elephants, and they came from Seleucus, not Ptolemy. So when we consider the mode of warfare being used in 2016, a great deal of time is spent trying to blame Russia and Putin. So remember, we're saying that Seleucus is Trump, and it's Seleucus that brings the elephants. What do the elephants represent? Anyone?
information.
Information.
In those times, I can't remember. What was it? Were they real elephants or what was that?
In real time, it was real elephant.
Yeah,
From
that's
India,
what I figured.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
But what it represents is it was a new mode of warfare.
Right.
And we're looking in this age, a new mode of warfare.
Oh, that's
Information warfare. So this is, let's see. So when we consider the mode of warfare being used in 2016, a great deal of time is spent on trying to blame Russia and Putin. This is something that Trump developed and used himself. So we made that point that it comes from Trump, that Putin does not run his Twitter feed and wasn't making those statements at the rallies. And Putin was not using Cambridge Analytica. When we consider these other histories,
what? It says that, what is that?
it's
So
not
we
Putin that was using all these things. It was Trump.
Okay.
We're not saying that Putin doesn't have his
Oh,
role.
okay.
We're not saying that Putin doesn't have his role.
Okay.
Okay. When we consider these other histories like World War II, this is not just local support. They're giving material that Trump could not go to war without having. What Putin did in 2016 with disinformation and hacking also comes into that story. Uh-oh.
Living on the edge.
Okay, in another class soon, we'll go into the history of Putin. It'll just be basic history, not a great detail. We want to understand where Putin came from and why he has a problem with Hillary and an alliance with Trump. We'll go into the history that builds in 2016, and that is part of the next study. So just to review the second perspective, Ipsus 2016 shows us who wins. It's Seleucus who has the 500 war elephants. It's Trump that has the new mode of warfare. And like she said up here, it's not that Putin didn't have his part with disinformation and hacking. That's part of it. But Trump is his own weapon. So we have Hitler begins World War II. We have Hitler as Trump and Stalin supporting Hitler, Putin supporting Trump. Just a review on that. And I think that was it. Where we end. And any questions, comments?
Why did you cross out the Poland?
Because he takes Poland first.
Oh, okay, I get that.
Takes Poland first.
And what is the EXE?
Executive branch.
Okay.
So Hitler takes
Oh,
Poland
and so
first.
France, Britain would represent the legislative and
Right.
judicial. Oh,
Right. I think that was shown on previous slides, previous studies.
Oh.
Are you guys all there? Anybody have anything to say? Comments?
No, I'm good.
Thoughts, questions?
Good.
Everybody's gonna be quiet? What about
We
you?
said good. Two of us said we're good.
Yeah. So does everybody understand? Has everybody following it okay? I mean,
Yeah,
it's kind of complicated.
I'm following.
Following? Because it is kind of complicated, but she is, I don't think you, can you see the screen right now?
Yep.
The slideshow?
Yeah.
Okay. It's just not on the slideshow part. But she's just showing us, breaking down the first perspective of, let me see if I can go back to that slide. I'm going to figure out which one it was. Where we have the two perspectives showing side by side. Maybe it's this one. Nope. Should be easier to find than this. There we go. So she's just taking the two different looks at the Battle of Ipsus, because you have things going on, even in our lives today, there are things going on in multiple directions, multiple things happening at once. So Seleucus, Lysimachus, Cassander, and Ptolemy are the four generals. They're all allied together against Antigonus. But Ptolemy doesn't show up to that battle. So the second perspective is taking us to what Ptolemy was doing, which is Daniel 11 verse, is that verse 5? Showing us the story of Ptolemy and Seleucus, where Daniel doesn't give us the story of Pyrrhus. He's giving us the story of these Syrian wars. He's giving us the story of leading us to Ptolemy and Seleucus. So at the Battle of Ipsus, when Ptolemy doesn't show up, Ptolemy is actually taking a territory, laying siege on a territory that belongs to Seleucus. So she takes from that and marks it then as another application of a battle between the king of the north and the king of the south. And in that application, Seleucus is the north and Ptolemy is the south, Trump is the north, and Putin is the south. And so in that aspect, they're fighting Antigonus. And so in that perspective, we see who wins, and it was Trump who won. In the other perspective, where you have Antigonus and Demetrius battling, Demetrius being the king of the north, Pyrrhus being the king of the south, supporting the king of the north, the alliance, fighting against the three allies, it's going to show us the death of Antigonus, the death of the empire, if we remember that from the previous studies, the death of the empire. But we're seeing the winner in the second perspective as Trump. So is everybody, I know it's confusing and it takes a lot. You guys should have it better than us when it comes to compartmentalizing. But no, I'm talking to the gentlemen that are here with us.
Oh, okay.
About how you have to keep completely separate the two stories and look at this story for what it's telling us and look at this story for what it's telling us. And it is complicated because it all comes down to the parables, understanding parable teaching and being able to take each story as a parable and what's it telling us.
Right.
And one story as a parable is showing us the death of Antigonus, and another story of the same battle is showing us who wins that battle. And it was Seleucus that won the battle with the 500 elephants. The elephants represent a new mode of warfare. What's our new mode of warfare? Information war. So Trump and his Twitter was his own weapon. I don't know if that's the right way to say that. So Putin is involved with the collusion and the disinformation and the hacking that he did. Putin is involved, but Trump is using that weapon.
Yeah.
And he used that weapon to win the election. Oh. So, okay, I think we're done early. And if we wind up going through these quicker, I don't know if we could always do this. I know I can't do one more, but I do want to I will keep doing two. But if somebody wants to try to take on a third one, that we could try to put 3 in a Sabbath. Anybody?
Can I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
About the first perspective, the right beneath Ipsus that shows the death of Antigonus. So how does the first perspective shows the death of Antigonus? I'm sorry, I guess I missed that one.
How does the first one show the death of Antigonus? When you still have the elephants in there.
Mhm.
It's mainly Lucas that is the one that destroys Antigonus. And you see the death of the empire in the first perspective.
So you mean the Seleucus and Lysimachus and Cassander are used against Antigonus?
In the second perspective, we actually see that it was Seleucus that won the battle, or Trump. In the first perspective, we see the death of the empire, where Antigonus represents.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I understand now.
It's complicated to grab in our heads.
Yes, Ptolemy was helping Seleucus.
Well, Ptolemy, in the first perspective, Ptolemy's not there. So look at the two perspectives completely separately. And in the first perspective, what we're seeing is this battle of the father and son against the 3 allies. And the son has support from Pyrrhus against the 3 allies. In that aspect, we have Trump and Putin. And but Clinton and Trump are not fighting each other. Demetrius and Antigonus are not fighting each other. They're fighting together to win control over those 3 allies. So in that sense, Clinton and Trump are not fighting each other. They don't want each other's stuff. They both are fighting for the 3 branches of the government. And so the first perspective shows us the death of the empire when you see it as Clinton, and Clinton being Washington, like the ancestor. When you're taking Antigonus and Alexander, then you can lay Clinton and Washington there. And so it's the death of the empire, the death of the United States at 2016, that never again will there be a Democrat in office going forward. And we knew that because we knew we're at the 45th and the last. But the end of the United States as we know it, but it takes a period of time for him to gather up and control all 3 allies. So it shows the death of the empire the war on the Western Front, the death of the empire. But in the second perspective, which is the one if I'm understanding correctly, and I'm still trying to grab it all too, but if I'm understanding correctly, the second perspective is the perspective that Daniel's showing us, that in this war, that it is Seleucus and Ptolemy fighting against Antigonus. Did I say that right? Seleucus and Ptolemy in alliance fighting against Antigonus. Okay, and that Seleucus wins this battle when he brings the elephants in and drives them between Antigonus and Demetrius. So Seleucus wins the battle between that king of the north. If you're looking at it from that perspective, between Seleucus and Ptolemy, Seleucus wins the battle against Antigonus. He defeats the empire.
Okay, thank you.
Because I know it is complicated to look at multiple things at the same time and try to have them all separated in your head to show a different frame in the story or in the movie.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
It came back to me why they go back to George Washington and they kind of skip over all the other presidents because he is the first. And Hillary
The
is
Constitution.
yes, the first.
The beginning and the end.
Exactly.
The Alpha and the Omega.
Yeah.
The
And
beginning of
that's
the
why.
empire and the end of the empire.
Right. That's why they go back. It's not that they skip, all the other presidents.
Like they're not important.
Yeah, they're not important. It's just they're looking at the Alpha and the Omega.
Right. Right. So in Daniel 11, he skips that history of Pyrrhus to go from Alexander to the 4 generals to the king of the north and the king of the south. We're just going back and looking at the skipped history, if I'm understanding correctly. Is that right, Adriana? That we're going back and looking at that skipped history to show us what it shows us. And then what it shows us is Pyrrhus. And Pyrrhus, we learn, is in 2 parts. Macedonia, which is another part that I need to better understand. But last night helped some, but I'm looking forward to going through the rest of these studies. So Pyrrhus and
Demetrius.
Huh? Yeah, I was going to say Pyrrhus in Macedonia. I twisted my words. Pyrrhus in Macedonia and Pyrrhus in Italy. So Pyrrhus in Macedonia is Demetrius, and Pyrrhus in Italy is
Rome.
And
Macedonia, it's just a shift westward, right? Because
Yeah.
the Macedonian War is right above, Macedon is right above Greece, and then it turns to on the other side of the pond, you have Rome. And
Okay. So they may have any questions or comments then? Should we go ahead and break, or what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Break for prayer and then break? Somebody want to close us in prayer and pray for the food? Adriana, do you want to pray?
sure. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for teaching us as much as you have. We thank you for continuing to open truths to our minds. We thank you for helping all of us to be attentive and focused on this message, Lord. Continue to help our minds grow and understand these things. Help us to continue to be able to grapple with these things, because they're only going to get more and more complex. But we know that you've taken us this far, and we know that you'll be able to take us all the way through until we have a perfect understanding of your truth, so that we can give these messages to the world. Continue to be with us and guide us through these times, Lord. Help us to put more that's bad out of our minds so we can fit more good information in there, because we've stored up a lot of stuff during our lives that's not useful. Help us to be able to make the changes that we need, Lord, and help us to be ready whatever comes in the future. We also ask a blessing on the food that we're all about to eat wherever we are, Lord. Bless the hands that made it. Help it to strengthen and nourish our bodies, and help it to get us through the rest of the day. We thank you and we pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.